Hey everyone, my name is Ryan, or S Reaper G. This is going to be my review of KOTOR on Switch. That is one Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic on the Nintendo Switch. If you're new to the channel, or you just don't know, Knights of the Old Republic is one of my personal favorite games of all time. Now, I don't know if you have a movie, or a game, or a show, or something else that you do that you can watch or play, or just do over and over and over again without it ever being old or boring to you. That is what KOTOR is for me. You have the story, the characters, its world. It's just completely captivating in my opinion, and it even harkens to an era of Star Wars that is so underutilized but so ripe with potential, at least in my opinion. There are no Skywalkers here. Now, when I heard it was coming to Nintendo Switch, of course I thought, I'm gonna buy it again, I'm gonna talk about it here on the channel, and I'm gonna review it for you. Now, for this review, I want to be clear that I'm not going to be really evaluating the gameplay, visuals, or the story, or the content too much, only in as far as these things relate to the quality of the port. And let me give you a pro tip: if you like the video and you like KOTOR content, subscribe to the channel. Now, the first thing I want to get into here is the visuals. Now, naturally, with the limitations of the Switch hardware that we know of, KOTOR is not going to be running any higher than 1080p on your TV screen. Now, that's perfectly fine, as this game is never really going to trick you into thinking that it was made recently. Unless, of course, you had a few drinks and blindfolded yourself and someone slipped Jedi Fallen Order into your console and then said, "Hey, look, it's Knights of the Old Republic you're playing. Isn't that crazy? Look how good it looks." Obviously, given that it's a Switch, there's going to be two primary ways you'll experience this game on the Switch, either on a TV or monitor or handheld. And we're going to talk about both of them here. Now, I played the game on both my way too big for my room 55-inch 4K TV, as well as my slightly more proportional to the size of my room 27-inch 4K monitor for my PC. Either way, I'll tell you, the game doesn't look bad. The image is clear and clean, text is clear and easily readable, which is a relief to me because in the earlier screenshots and even the Nintendo Direct where this was announced, I thought it looked pretty rough. The images and video looked overly compressed, and it's not surprising considering Nintendo barely knows what the internet is, even at this late date. But I'm happy to tell you that this isn't the case with the whole port itself, the actual port of this game. On the Shadowlands of Kashyyyk, you see the fog and blades of grass that move as you walk through them. Some characters and models have noticeably sharpened features, like Karth with wrinkles and a more defined beard of sorts. However, it's not perfect. There's parts where textures on some objects looked more blurry than I remember them being, and not like oh, I looked closely at this one blade of grass in the Shadowlands of Kashyyyk and noticed it wasn't rendered in 4K Ultra HD. Unbelievable. I'm gonna write a series of tweets about this. The people need to know. No, that's not what this is. It's more that there's times, for example, with character models that look like they were staunchly protesting the advent of modern day resolutions, or character portraits compressed to the high heavens in order to grace your TV screen adequately. Similarly, when looking at the static character models in the party selection screen, they look a bit rough, but otherwise it's a 2003 game and we could go through this otherwise with a fine-tooth comb and find subtle differences between the different versions of the game on Xbox and PC here and there. But otherwise, it doesn't look too bad. Now, of course, the star of the show here, as with many Switch games, and it's no different here, is Handheld Mode, and is probably the chief reason you're going to be picking up this port if you're interested at all in it. This is where I personally recommend playing KOTOR the most, as it looks sharp and on the small screen, it feels great to play. You don't notice as many of those rougher edges because of the denser pixels on the smaller screen. Character models, especially among party members and main characters, are more detailed, or at least feel more detailed, with wrinkles and facial hair even, as I mentioned before, but it looks better on the smaller screen. Something you do notice, of course, like I said, on the TV, but ultimately just looks way better on that 720p screen. Similarly, armors and gear have a less "I can't color in the lines" feel on the small screen, which is the theme of this port. The small screen is where the best experience can be had. Otherwise, regardless of how you are mainly playing it, it's still the game you remember from 2003. Speaking of, there's one more visual quirk I want to mention before I move on. You'll notice that there's a pretty big text prompt that appears at the top of the screen every single time you get into a battle. It takes up an absurd amount of space, and I'd venture to say it's the biggest issue that I have with this port, especially in handheld mode. It's distracting. It takes up almost half the screen, and I would suggest if you can't tell you're in combat by virtue of the fact that there are multiple people attacking you, this resulting in the decreasing hit points of your party, may I suggest that you have bigger problems than not knowing when combat is engaged. and maybe you want to consult a professional about that. To my knowledge, as of right now, as of the recording of this review, there is no way to remove it or shrink it down beyond turning the game off and giving up entirely and moving on with your life. It feels like this is just the same mobile port they did a couple years ago, with obvious control changes and certain optimizations for the Switch, but it's just on the Switch now. Hopefully they fix that soon, because for me, it's the biggest off-putting part of this port. The one last thing I will mention, and this is just a general visual quirk that I have, so it's not really necessarily a negative towards this port, is I just prefer if the HUD was just a little closer to the corners and the sides of the screen, as opposed to seemingly kind of congregating towards the middle a little bit. It's just a little nudge I think it needs, and it'll be perfect and it'll be fine. And then get rid of that big ass text box and I think you're golden. But again, that's just my personal preference. You may not be bothered by that. That's just me. Now let's talk about the controls. Controls are not surprising. It's probably similar to an Xbox controller, or if you've mapped your controls on a controller. On the Joy-Cons, you have the left and right triggers to change what you're targeting. The right bumper changes which character you're controlling, where the left one pauses the gameplay. You have the D-pad that helps you scroll on the hotbar menu below at the bottom of the screen. A confirms, B backs out, and X to stack attacks in combat. Overall though, I'm satisfied with the controls, I have to say, and I find them rather easily and comfortable again on Joy-Cons. I did not test them out on the other peripherals that are available on Switch, but as the PC version of KOTOR does not have native controller support, this is another good reason that this port may be a good option for some of you. The only other small issue is that when you are trying to pick certain commands for your characters and you are moving through combat environments, trying to maybe get away a little bit, heal up, is that you're going to notice that as you're picking selections, the game will automatically target certain objects that are in your periphery, or in your point of view, I should say. And with that comes the game resetting any commands that you had selected, and it's kind of annoying and it kind of makes the game feel a little twitchy at times. But otherwise, it's a very minor complaint that I have and that I noticed while playing. Now on the audio front, there is not much to say other than the soundtrack to KOTOR is great. It's got that mix of classic Star Wars with its own tracks, and it had me feeling very nostalgic during my playthrough. And one of my favorite pieces being the track that plays on Manon. It's just so good. Otherwise, I did notice some subtle audio issues, and I'm unsure if either of them are going to be persistent or even noticed by all of the players who play this port. But for example, in the original and PC versions of KOTOR, there was an audio cue of the main player character when you would switch to them from another character. Now, of course, your character that you play as and you create does not speak, so it's less of a glaring omission in my opinion, and more of a, if this is not a bug, why was it taken out or omitted? And then some sound effects cutting in and out at different times, mainly I found with like lightsabers cutting up enemies on different planets. But regardless, the audio is great, the soundtrack is great, and I didn't notice many other issues if there were any. Now on the performance, the Nintendo Switch is not known for having strong game performance. Despite that, I do think the Switch is a good console overall. Playing an older game like KOTOR almost feels like a dream nobody expected would come true years ago when this game was conceived and being developed. Naturally, you'll be curious, how does the game perform? And honestly, it's pretty good. There's definitely some small dips on frame rate at times that you may or may not notice when there's a lot going on screen, but I really only found these to be pretty prevalent when there's a lot of explosions and effects going on all at once. Notably in the first part of the game when aboard the Endar Spire, there's tons of explosions throughout the ship and on. Otherwise, I think it holds up pretty well throughout. I might have been imagining it, or maybe I'm just a bit delusional, time will tell. But I felt the game seemed to chug a bit more at times when on my TV screen versus in handheld mode where it held up better, and you'll be good either way, but I think it's worth noting those little issues. Something you may not experience too is sometimes you'll have those little cinematic movies throughout this game, just of the ship going to various locations, or some pre-rendered cutscenes. I did notice some stuttering in the frames during those cutscenes, but otherwise those played out pretty well, and I'm pretty happy with how the port performs overall. But really, KOTOR is a fantastic game, and I would wager if you like RPGs, if you like Star Wars, if you like sci-fi, you need to go play this game. The question for most folks is, if you want to play KOTOR and haven't, or if you want to get back to it, where is the best place to play it? If you want to pick up and play, it's the easiest it's ever been on the Nintendo Switch. Native controller support, the ability to play it even in handheld mode, really great options for you if you want to play the game on the go, or on the toilet, or in bed, whichever you feel appropriate. Now, something that is kind of a problem is that the PC version of KOTOR requires a bit of tinkering, as KOTOR by itself doesn't natively support HD resolutions on PC like the 2015 update for KOTOR 2 enabled that game up to 4K to be able to do. So you need to do some slight editing behind the scenes to upscale the game, the HUD, etc. It's not super difficult, but something you should be aware of if you want to play this game in higher resolutions. But with that, you get the addition of many mods that are great and can definitely give you some fresh things to look forward to in this game. It's where I primarily play because I'm looking for a fresh experience for a game that I've played 653 million times. For example, I've never been a big fan of how the Jedi robes looked in the original KOTOR, so I usually download a mod that makes them more akin to the Jedi tunics from the movies. This is something you don't get the ability to do with on Switch. If that is important to you, the PC version is probably going to be better. But either way, both versions, PC will cost you $10 and $15 on Switch. Now, I think both prices are fairly reasonable and I don't think you can go wrong either way. It's more, what are you exactly looking for when you want to play this game? You're looking for portability because that's what you get with the Switch and it's awesome. I can attest to that 100%. Are you looking for pick up and play? Still great here on the Switch, but if you play on an Xbox, I'm sure it also had that same effect. Or you're looking for mods. That is not what you're going to be able to get on console, unfortunately. KOTOR is one of my favorite games of all time, so when I say that you should play it, regardless of platform, I mean it. Whether you play it on your Xbox, PC, or now Switch, you should not miss this incredible game if you have. The Switch port is great overall, so I feel very comfortable telling you to go and play it regardless of whether you have reservations or not. Just keep in mind some of the little quirks or issues that I noted, and note the platform you want to play on is dependent on what your personal needs are when playing this game, or maybe you're just a crazy person who buys this title on every platform just to play it and spread the good word of KOTOR. Yeah, good thing there's nobody like that here, right? Right? Yeah. Anyway, folks, I'm sorry this review is late, but thank you for your patience as I wrote and edited this review of KOTOR on Switch. I hope you found it helpful, or at the very least entertaining. Got lots of other stuff planned, so I hope you consider supporting the channel with a sub as it helps a ton. Let me know what you think down below, of course. Maybe I missed something that you want to share with the community. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, and hit that big ass ugly dislike button if you didn't. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you all soon.